Hello and welcome to the Hope Recovery Podcast. I am your host, Greg Schmalhofer, and this is officially our fourth podcast episode. So with this episode, we have 1 month completed. So thank you all for joining us today and for being a part of the Hope Recovery Podcast. And yes, we are coming to you from our home studio right here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And before we jump into the main interview portion, let me just make a few comments. And I know everyone is at a different point in recovery. And if you are struggling in recovery, if you perhaps are in the midst of a lot of crazy things going on in your life, or perhaps you feel that you have failed God so many times that you're not sure God will forgive you, let me encourage you to remember there is always hope with God. Slow down in your day today and consider this passage for yourself. Psalm 138:3, which says, "In the day when I cried out, you answered me and made me bold with strength in my soul." There is a God in heaven who is the true higher power, and he does want to help you. He wants to help you to be clean and sober, just one day at a time. He wants to help you with whatever struggle of life you might be facing. Ask God for help, and he will indeed answer your prayer. So today, I am so glad to be joined in our home studio with Tim Lease, or perhaps I should say Dr. Lease. So Tim, thank you for joining me today. This is the very first month of the Hope Recovery Podcast, so thank you for your part in making this first month happen. And Tim, I'm really happy to have you here, so welcome.
Thanks, Greg. I've been blessed so far with your prior podcasts. Being a novice to the podcast arena, it has kind of been an eye-opener and really amazing. And I really appreciated that you founded this and have this going.
Yeah, thank you, Tim.
And I appreciate your allowing me to spend some time talking with you today.
Oh, well, it is my pleasure, and I really am very grateful that you were willing to come and take time out of your day to join me and to share some of your life story and how God has used you through some of your struggles and has used you to meet the needs of many people. And so, Tim, as I was preparing for this podcast today and the interview with you, I was brought to a particular passage, and the passage is Proverbs 22:6, which says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." And so if I may ask or say, Tim, in many ways, you were brought up in a very strong and solid Christian home with solid Christian instruction and example. But as is so often the case, we take a different path. And so if you would be so kind to take just a few minutes and talk to our podcast listeners about some of your early years growing up and then some of the decisions or events that happened that led you to your struggle with alcohol.
Yes, I was blessed to grow up in a Christian home. You've heard of PKs. I was a double PK, a preacher's kid and a president's kid.
Yeah.
Because at the time, my father was the third president of Lancaster Bible College. He was president for 17 years. And I actually grew up on that campus, so to speak, as a kid. So naturally, out of private schools, I had gone to faith-based schools. Out of there, it was only natural for me to enter Lancaster Bible College. And I was in the pastoral studies program. And then I discovered alcohol and drugs and a few other things to go along with that. And to my father's sadness, he had to expel me from the college after my sophomore year. And that was kind of a real low point there. But for me, it kind of opened new doors that I wasn't allowed to look at or experience. And as I've learned in recovery, most of us start and do what we do because it was fun.
Right.
And I found all kinds of new things, all those fresh fruit here and there that I had never tasted. And I liked it. And so from there, I went on. I graduated from Millersville with a bachelor's in psychology, but I went into the hotel business for almost 30 years. And I was successful, but I drank. From the very beginning, I began to drink. And I had lots of issues, but I never really realized that it was related to alcohol. It was always related to other people.
Right.
We often say, if you had this or that, you drink like I do. As time went on, it wasn't that I didn't believe in God anymore. I just didn't care. And that was kind of me. I knew there was some creator God out there. I wasn't so sure he was like my father told me about. But, it didn't really matter to me either. I just didn't care.
Right.
And I pretty much did what I wanted to do. And what you often find in drugs and alcohol is that the more you do it, the less fun it is.
Right.
I was always trying to get to that old high or a new high that beat the other one. And it became progressively more difficult. The one thing I knew was that when I drank to get drunk. And there wasn't just have a beer and be done. No, I advanced far beyond that. But I was also very disciplined. I could segment my life, at least I thought. And I worked well, and I was successful in business. But I had my work sphere and my drinking sphere. And I tried not to let the two collide. But as time went on, after many years, it was kind of difficult not to see that it was mixing with each other. And the real eye-opener toward the end, I knew that I was starting to get sick. Okay. I would actually spit up blood at night when I woke up. It'd be on my pillow, and I'd think little of it. And I'd go take a shower and spit more blood out. But that same evening, when happy hour rolled around at 4:30, I was at happy hour. One day, though, I started noticing my eyes were kind of yellow. And every once in a while, I'd see parts of my arms or my chest turning yellow. And it wasn't until I was away on a weekend down in Baltimore at a hotel, and I took my son swimming. He was about 8 or 9 at the time. And he looked over at me and he says, "Dad, you're yellow." I says, "No, Hank." I said, "That's sunburn." Yeah. Well, that worked well until he got home that night and talked to his mother and says, "Mom, Dad's yellow." And they convinced me to go see my doctor. And I went and did that, and he ran me through a number of tests, did blood work and things. And I got the call from my doctor at 10:05 that evening after work. And he said, "I got the results back." He said, "You have end-stage cirrhosis of the liver." He says, "You know how you get that?" I said, "Well, I got a good idea." He said, "Well, you have two choices." He said, "You can keep on drinking, and you probably have 3 to 6 months to live." He said, "Or you could quit, and we'll see what we can do from there." So I thought about it pretty quickly and thought, well, that second option certainly sounds better than the first one. And I got off the phone, and I went to my freezer. I always kept some Jägermeister in the freezer, and probably there was about 2 shots left in the bottle. I remember I took that, and I drank it, took it out, and threw it out. That was 2010. By the grace of God, that was the last drink I have had,
Amen.
and by his grace. But the journey between then and now has been simply amazing.
It has.
It went downhill from there rather than uphill. I didn't drink, and about a month later, on August the 13th, I started having these terrible stomach cramps at work. And all of a sudden, it just overcame me. And I called my doctor. He says, call 911. So they admitted me. And I remember a surgeon walked in and she said, give me a pen to the girl with her. And she made markings on my stomach. And she says, you're going to surgery. That was the last thing I remembered until about 9:30 that night when I came to. And I was told that I had had surgery, that I had had a ruptured ulcer, and that they had repaired it, and they'd talk to me in the morning. So I was back in my room, and that night I was just in pain. I had no clue really what was going on, but I do remember one thing. I kept trying to recite the Lord's Prayer. It's the only thing that seemed to give me comfort.
Isn't that something?
But I do know that I was trying to say the Lord's Prayer.
And you were reaching out to God in some way.
I acknowledge that if there was any help out there, it had to be from above, because it certainly was apparently not coming from me. And it got really bad. I ended up being hospitalized for about 16 days. The doctor said they didn't think I was going to make it. Frankly, I didn't think I'd make it till the next spring.
So
October.
the doctors actually said that to you, Tim?
Yeah, they said you better get things ready. And I agreed with them at that point. But I also felt a tremendous sense of resilience that I was going to fight this thing, and I was not going to give up. But I also felt that I could do it on my own. My condition had been so bad that I needed to get on a liver transplant list. And the problem was you had to go 6 months without drinking, not to be drinking, and you had to show that you were doing something not to drink again. So every darn person I talked to said I should go to AA. My physician, my liver doctor, my wound doctor. I mean, anybody who talked to me, even my insurance people told me, you should go to AA.
And what were your thoughts at that point, Tim? I mean, did you see the value there, or did you feel like it's not really necessary, but if I need to do it to get the liver transplant, I will? I
was kind of getting to that point, but I was starting to recover, but I could hardly eat or anything, and December rolled around. And if I had to think of one of my worst days, was December 31st of 2010. I remember watching New Year's Eve. It was frankly the first New Year's Eve I saw sober in 30 plus years. Laying there, my son was out shooting fireworks off. I couldn't even move off the couch, and I just thought miserable, and I thought everything was totally pointless. And I had no idea how I was gonna find anything worthwhile. My job had separated from me. They had let me go. But now I had no job. I had no health. And in my opinion, I had no future. And being confronted with them with a new year coming, it really didn't look so good. And so about a week later, I decided, I think I'll check out AA. And as I've heard many others say, AA really saved my life. And what they did from there was they pointed me back to God. And that's really what started some tremendous changes. I was able to get on the liver transplant list through Geisinger. But what AA pointed me to was God. First, the steps were really pretty obvious to me at that point. First is admitting we're helpless and there's no future. Well, that was pretty obvious to me. I had lost everything. I saw no future and doubted whether I was going to be a part of it even. And then secondly, that there is hope out there.
Amen.
And I kept coming back to thinking about God and my father's commitment to God and his love for Christ. And I thought, well, it probably is the direction to go. I thought, well, where can I sort of tie things back together? And someone at my father's funeral a number of years before, I was befriended by Dr. Peter Tague, president of Lancaster Bible College. And he befriended me for some reason. Never questioned me, anything. He would take me out to lunch, invite me over to his house, invited me to functions at the campus and everything. And, I should go talk to him. Spent a while talking with him. Was really blessed, and then he got me with the gentleman who was my father's dean as he was there, and also longtime theology professor, Dr. Thomas Feigert. And I would spend Mondays, at least one Monday a month in the afternoon with Dr. Feigert, just talking about God's Word and recovery and just all kinds of things. And he was kind of the closest, these two men were the closest people I could get to my father who had passed away and never saw me get clean and sober. And these individuals modeled him, and they modeled Christ back into my life. And when I made the decision to change and to return to Christ and to accept him as the Lord of my life again, I made two decisions. I decided, one, that I wanted to find a closer walk with the Lord, because I felt if I did that, my life would be much more positive. And then secondly, I look back at all these years of all my self-inflicted things and pain on everybody else and thought, that can be used to help others. So it became my twofold goal. One, to find a closer walk with the Lord, and two, to try to help others and share that message with them. Amen. That indeed there is hope in recovery. And through a conversation with Dr. Tague, I mentioned, I still feel bad about getting tossed out of here all those years ago. And I said, I'm thinking of coming back and finishing that degree. He said, well, you already have a bachelor's. Why don't you get a master's degree? 2 years later, I was able to graduate. And I had the blessing of talking at graduation. I honored my father, and I used the verse that you had quoted, bring up a child in the way that they should go. And when they're old, they will not depart from it. It took a while for me to get back there. But I also believe sometimes it takes that long for the Lord to do in us and to have us be able to accomplish what he's always intended for us to do. But now I think I have more of an ability to connect to people I had never even spent time with. And those people were my quote-unquote friends. And today I'm just blessed to find that I am comfortable and can walk in many different walks that I never would have. And I think the Lord uses that and uses those experiences for us. Then I was a glutton for punishment. They started a PhD program at the college, and I went right into that. I was actually blessed to graduate in 2020 with my PhD in biblical studies.
Isn't that something?
The main gist of the topic of my dissertation was about, in Isaiah, Jesus as the wonderful counselor. And I attempted to prove that wonderful should really be miraculous, that Jesus, the future Messiah, would be a miracle worker.
Amen.
I believe he's still working miracles today. Certainly worked a miracle in my life. About 3 years ago, I was removed from the transplant list.
Yeah.
The head of transplant at Geisinger told me, said there's only, you're the first person that I took off this list who hadn't either received one or died.
Isn't that something?
That's a miracle.
Praise the Lord indeed.
And that's God working miracles. He does it in different ways. And certainly, once I started recovering and everything else, I realized that he kept me around for a reason. And I don't always know or fathom what that is, but I just figured I better not mess this one up again. I know, though, that so many people, their recovery and their walk is much, much different than that. I don't know how I have been able to stay without a drink, without relapsing on that or something, but others find the recovery route much different. But I do know that if you're in early recovery, it's really tough.
Yeah.
It is really tough. But always, early on, I wasn't sure I liked it, hearing the promises read at AA. And I really didn't think they could come true. But about 6 months in, all of a sudden I realized, well, maybe that could work, that could work. Well, those promises that you hear at the meetings read really can come true if you're willing to commit yourself to it. But I could not have done any of it without the work of the Holy Spirit and Christ in me. Just to think that there's a higher power is looking in the right direction.
It is, yes.
But finding the Creator God and His Son and being indwelt by the Spirit is what changes everything. I call it the special ingredient. I know you can stay sober for many, many years without a personal relationship with the Lord. But I truly don't believe you can find happiness and purpose until you accept all that He has to offer. And that simply means you have to give your all to Him. Now, it doesn't happen every day, and we still take our will back. But I know where my direction should come from, and I know what way I should be looking.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tim. I appreciate your story and how God used your struggle to not only turn your life around, but then to enable you to help other people. And your ending comments there made me remember what you, I think, had often said, that while you can be you can be sober, but until you bring God into your life, that's when you can really have peace and happiness and joy in your life and still be sober. That without God in your life, yeah, you may be sober, but you're not going to be happy.
Yeah, in the rooms we call it a dry drunk.
Yeah.
And I've met a few of those. Man, some of the most miserable people you ever wanted to meet, but they've been sober for many years. I think to a degree that they just don't have, as I said, the special ingredient, and that's faith in God, the God who created things, created you and me, and wants us to be successful. I believe He wants us to be successful in recovery. I believe each of us has our own challenges. It's not always drugs or alcohol. It can be food. It can be pornography. It can be any number of things.
Money, greed, power.
As Russ had said in the prior podcast, it's a gift of desperation. I will also admit as well, the older I get, the smarter my father appears.
There you go. Yeah. Well, and Tim, you said about your dad that he never saw you be successful in recovery. Your father had such a legacy himself. I mean, he, as president of Lancaster Bible College, he pastored a number of churches. He just did so much in his life. He spoke apparently oftentimes at Grace Baptist Church. He spoke at Water Street Mission, and then was not only a professor, but then the president of Lancaster Bible College. So, Tim, let me ask you this. What was it like for you to finally then and eventually have the Lord direct you to minister to some of those same places that your father had ministered as well?
Yeah, that was kind of amazing. Back in just a couple years ago, I guess it was 2018, exactly 40 years from the year that I was asked to leave Lancaster Bible College, I was able to step in the classroom and teach Prelude to Theology in the Bible Theology department. That was an amazing experience. 40 years later, and I'm blessed still to, on occasion, be able to teach as an adjunct at the college now where Pop was. And at the end of my dissertation in the acknowledgments, I indicated an acknowledgment to my father and then said, Pop, I'm finally in the family business. It took a while to get into the family business, and I sure resisted any part of it. And it is one of my great regrets that Pop didn't see me come around. But I have no doubt he's quite aware of it at this point. I am assured that from Hebrews, he's part of that cloud of witnesses up there. The Lord can use anybody in any way, in any shape. But I was truly blessed to have that foundation. And but the whole key is the foundation has to be God.
And you had mentioned about AA saved your life. And it has always just amazed me, the wisdom of AA, the big book of AA, and then the Narcotics Anonymous as well, and that they both point people to God. And for AA and NA, for them to have that focus, I just think is so wise that it is very inviting then for people to, okay, I need a higher power. I need God in my life. And Tim, you had mentioned that your father, did not see you successful in recovery, but I absolutely agree that he knows, and that reunion and that celebration is just delayed to another time, but that he is very, very thrilled and proud of you with where you're at and with how you're honoring God with your life and how God is using you despite your past, which is so true for all of us, that nobody's perfect, but God uses all of us to help people, to point people to the loving God of the Bible. So let me ask you another question here, Tim. What was it like then for you when you officially became a staff member of Grace Baptist Church and helped lead then the Discovery Recovery Ministry? What was that like for you then, Tim?
Yeah, that was amazing. And as staff member, I was your assistant, which was really an incredible experience.
It was.
I probably got into it sooner than I should have, but God's timing is a lot better than our timing. And just to be able to share with others and to learn how to share God's Word, to be able to make Scripture understandable on a level that someone in early recovery or anyone can really relate to, and see how the Lord is using that to speak to us today. The podcast, I think, is a really neat way to, as I mentioned earlier to you, to extend beyond the brick and mortars of a meeting or something like that. To be able to speak to someone in their car or in their house and to share that same kind of message of what God does for us, and that indeed there is hope.
There is hope.
You're definitely the right direction on the hope. And working in ministry was just such a blessing. And I think we both grew together.
Oh,
and everything.
Absolutely.
You have talents way beyond mine in many ways, and I have different ones as well. And it was just it was so cool to work in ministry with many people coming into recovery early. And to be able to combine the two is really an exceptional opportunity, and one that I will never forget the blessing of that. I believe I can carry that on as an adjunct professor and teaching young students, but to really be on kind of the front lines with others like myself who are just trying to get by.
Yeah, trying to make it.
Trying to see that it's worth hanging around for.
Yeah.
It's worth not going out again and using or something.
Yeah.
If you can help someone with that, give them a little hope with that, that can go a real, real long way.
Yeah. Well, Tim, you and I partnered together with Discovery Recovery and for about 5 years. And that was a wonderful time for me. It was one of the best times of my life. And to be that engaged in ministry was just such a blessing to me. And I know you have said it, Russ has said it, many people have said it, that we received perhaps more of a blessing than the people we're ministering to. And that's how I felt. Brenda and I both felt that way. And it was such a wonderful time, and we are glad and eager to see how God is in some way continuing to use us to help people and to care for people and to minister to people.
I got the biggest ongoing blessing that anyone could have had through both the ministry and through Discovery Recovery. I met my wife, Bridget, there.
Indeed.
So that's a blessing that I continue to get to experience, and I'm blessed that she too has a heart for sharing God's Word to people in recovery, and the fact that we can work together in some regards there is exceptional.
Well, and you're right. Bridget certainly has blessed many people and continues, like yourself, to have a burden and a desire to help people. Well, Tim, as we sort of come to the close, toward the end of our time together, let me ask you this. So at one point you felt like you had no hope. What would you say to some of our listeners right now who might also feel like that they don't have hope, that they have been through so much and they have experienced so much tragedy in their life, and that their future, all they can see is that it looks so bleak? What would you say to someone like that is not sure that they can do it or that they have a future?
I think it has to start with a closer walk with the Lord. I also believe that using the benefit of the fellowship of the rooms is critical early on, because you need someone to teach you how not to drink or how not to use. You also need the strong support of others who are fighting the same demons that you are fighting.
And you had mentioned about being engaged with the rooms and going to AA meetings or NA meetings. And part of what I believe people see there is they hear then how other people have been successful. 30 days, a year, 5 years. And it then shows them that that's evidence of hope. It is possible. People do recover. And with the message that you need a higher power, you need God in your life, that then brings in the special ingredient, right? That will help people, guide them to be successful in recovery. Well, Tim, before I close, is there any other closing thoughts that you would like to just share with our listeners before I make a few comments?
Just the idea that there truly is hope, and at no point, despite how dark it looks, maybe that's really the dawning of something so much better. But there truly is hope.
Well, let me speak directly to our podcast listeners now, and wherever you are at in recovery or any struggle of life, As Tim has indicated, regardless of how bleak perhaps you may feel your future looks like, there is always hope with God. God does not give up on you, and God is still there. If you bring God into your life, recovery is absolutely possible. Your future can be very different from your past. There is indeed always hope with God. Regardless of what you may be facing today in recovery or with any challenge of life, I would encourage you to remember Psalm 138:3. In the day when I cried out, you answered me and made me bold with strength in my soul. I encourage you to call out to God today, whatever you're facing, wherever you're at. Remember that God can help you, and God wants to help you, and that God can dramatically change the direction of your life. Tim, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Greg.
On the Hope Recovery Podcast. And to all of our podcast listeners, thank you for joining us today. Take care, and God bless you all.